The Arizona Territory, 1876. The sun beats mercilessly on the stone walls of Yuma Territorial Prison as Catherine Winters scrubs the floor of the warden's office. 3 years earlier, she had been the proud owner of Riverbend Ranch. Now she is prisoner number 3291, serving a life sentence for a murder she didn't commit. Catherine's once soft hands are now calloused and raw from hard labor. Her auburn hair, once flowing freely across her shoulders, is cropped short against her scalp, a punishment for her third escape attempt. But her eyes remain defiant, burning with the same fierce determination that made her one of the most successful ranchers in the territory. "You missed a spot, Winters," Warden Simmons says, deliberately tracking mud across the freshly cleaned floor. "Best start over." Catherine bites her tongue. She knows better than to respond. The last woman who talked back spent 2 weeks in solitary confinement and came out a different person. That night, in the cramped women's cell block, Catherine lies on her thin mattress, staring at the ceiling. The other women around her have fallen into fitful sleep, but Catherine's mind is racing. Tomorrow marks 2 years since Judge Maxwell Harrison sentenced her to life imprisonment for allegedly killing her neighbor over a water dispute. 2 years since the judge and his railroad partner Edwin Blackwood seized her land through a legal auction. 2 years of waiting for an opportunity. Outside, storm clouds gather on the horizon. The distant rumble of thunder echoes across the desert, growing closer with each passing hour. By midnight, rain lashes against the prison walls, and lightning illuminates the cell in brief, electric flashes. "Storm's getting worse," whispers Martha, an elderly woman in the neighboring bunk. "Biggest I've seen in years." Catherine says nothing, but her eyes track the movements of the guards as they make their rounds, more hurried than usual, as water begins to leak through the ceiling. A deafening crack splits the night as lightning strikes the prison's watchtower. The impact shakes the entire building. Shouts of alarm ring out, followed by the sound of running feet. The emergency bell begins to toll frantically. Fire in the North Tower. Someone shouts, and the night erupts into chaos. In the confusion, Catherine moves with purpose. She has prepared for this moment. From beneath her mattress, she retrieves a crude lockpick fashioned from a stolen fork. While the guards rush to contain the fire, she works methodically on her cell door, her hands steady despite the adrenaline coursing through her veins. The lock clicks open. Catherine slips out into the darkened corridor. Rain pours through a damaged section of the roof, drenching her prison uniform. She navigates the familiar hallways, ducking into shadows whenever footsteps approach. At the laundry room, she quickly changes into clothes she has hidden there over weeks' men's work clothes that will help disguise her identity. The prison yard is in chaos. Guards run back and forth with buckets of water, trying to douse the flames engulfing the watchtower. The main gate stands unmanned. Catherine takes a deep breath and walks purposefully across the yard, head down against the driving rain. No one gives her a second glance, just another guard helping with the emergency. At the gate, she slips the heavy bolt free and steps into freedom for the first time in 2 years. By dawn, Catherine is miles away, having stolen a horse from a nearby farm. She knows she has perhaps a day before they realize she's missing and organize a proper search. Her first destination is clear an old line shack on what was once her property, where her late husband James had hidden emergency supplies and documents. The morning sun reveals a landscape both familiar and painful, the rolling hills and grasslands of what was once Riverbend Ranch. Now railroad survey stakes mark the land, and the main house sits abandoned, its windows boarded up as it awaits demolition for the coming railroad. Catherine approaches the line shack cautiously. It appears undisturbed, half hidden in a grove of cottonwood trees. Inside, she pries up the loose floorboard her husband had shown her years ago. Relief washes over her as she finds the oilskin package still there, containing a small amount of money, a pistol, and most importantly, James's journal and map. "I'll make this right, James," she whispers, running her fingers over his handwriting. "I swear it." As she reads through the journal, Catherine's eyes widen. The final entries describe James's discovery of gold on their northern property line. Discovery he had kept secret, planning to use the profits to expand their ranch. The entry is dated 3 days before his accident while repairing a fence line. Catherine's suspicions harden into certainty. James hadn't fallen and broken his neck. He had been murdered, and Judge Harrison and Blackwood had orchestrated everything. False murder charge against her, the seizure of her land, all to get access to the gold. With renewed determination, Catherine cuts her hair even shorter and binds her chest tightly. In her men's clothing, she becomes Cal Winter, a drifter looking for work. Her first task is find evidence of the conspiracy and allies who can help her expose the truth. 3 days later, in the dusty town of Liberty Creek, Catherine now, fully in character, as Cal enters the Golden Nugget Saloon. Judge Harrison and Blackwood's corruption extends throughout the territory. But here, 30 miles from her former ranch, she might find people willing to talk dot at the bar. Conversations buzz about the railroad's coming arrival and the mysterious prison escape that has the territory's lawmen in an uproar. Wanted posters with Catherine's face are plastered on every wall, offering a substantial reward for her capture. "Quite the bounty they're offering for that woman," says a gruff voice beside her. Catherine turns to find herself face to face with Sam Hawkins, former deputy marshal of Redemption Creek. Her heart races. Hawkins had been present at her trial, standing behind the judge. But rumors had circulated that he'd left his position under mysterious circumstances. "Seems like a lot of trouble for one woman," Catherine replies, lowering her voice to maintain her disguise. "Depends on what she knows," Hawkins says thoughtfully. Studying her face a moment too long, Catherine tenses, ready to flee, when Hawkins leans closer and whispers, "Your disguise isn't bad, Mrs. Winters, but I'd suggest avoiding folks who've seen you before. Fortunately for you, I've got no love for Harrison or his railroad friends." Their eyes lock in a moment of tense understanding. Catherine has found her first ally or walked into a trap. Chapter 2. Gathering. Storm dawn breaks over the hills surrounding Liberty Creek as Catherine and Sam Hawkins prepare to leave town. Their plans, discussed in whispers in Sam's rented room, are dangerous but clear. Gather evidence against Judge Harrison and Edwin Blackwood, find witnesses willing to testify, and deliver everything to the federal marshal in Santa Fe, beyond Harrison's sphere of influence. "Harrison's built quite a network," Sam explains as they saddle their horses behind the livery stable. "When I started asking questions about irregular land acquisitions, I was told to mind my business. When I didn't, I found myself facing trumped up corruption charges." Catherine secures her saddlebags, containing James's journal and the precious map. How many others has he done this to? At least a dozen families throughout the territory. Most took the money and left. Those who refused ... double quotes, Sam's voice trails off meaningfully. "Ended up like me," Catherine finishes, "or like James. They ride out as the town is still waking, taking the back trails to avoid the main roads where bounty hunters will be watching for the escaped prisoner." Catherine rides with the ease of someone born to the saddle, her posture and movements maintaining. Her disguise is Cal Winter. Their first destination is the neighboring Sherman Ranch, where old Tom Sherman had lost his property under suspicious circumstances. 6 months before Catherine's arrest, the Sherman place stands in disrepair, its once proud ranch house now weather-beaten and abandoned. As they approach, a rifle barrel emerges from a broken window. "That's far enough," calls a raspy voice. "We're not here to cause trouble, Tom," Sam calls back. It's Sam Hawkins, I'm no longer with the marshal's office. After tense negotiation, they're allowed inside. Tom Sherman is a shell of the robust rancher. Catherine remembers his frame gaunt, his eyes haunted. The interior of the house reveals his desperate circumstances. He's living in a single room of what was once a prosperous home. They said I failed to pay my taxes, Tom explains bitterly. Taxes that suddenly tripled with no warning. When I went to the county office to dispute it, they showed me documents with my signature forged, of course. We need your testimony, Tom, Catherine says, still maintaining her disguise. We're gathering evidence against Harrison and Blackwood. The old rancher laughs harshly. And who are you, boy? Catherine hesitates, then removes her hat, meeting his gaze directly. Catherine Winters. I owned River Bend Ranch. Tom's eyes widen. In recognition. They said you murdered Ben Taylor over water rights. They lied, just like they lied about your taxes. By nightfall, they have Tom's signed affidavit describing the fraudulent seizure of his land. It's a start, but far from enough to bring down a territorial judge and a railroad baron. Their journey continues, each day bringing new risks and challenges. Catherine masters her disguise, learning to move and speak as Cal Winter, while at night. She pores over James's journal, piecing together the extent of the gold discovery that cost him his life. In the small settlement of Coopersville, they find David Cooper, formerly the county clerk, now operating a struggling general store. After careful approach and vetting by Sam, Cooper reveals how he was forced out of his position when he questioned altered land records. They replaced me with Harrison's nephew, Cooper explains, his voice low despite the empty store. The boy has no experience, but does whatever his uncle tells him. Did you keep any of the original records? Sam asks. Cooper hesitates, then nods. Slightly. I made copies of some of the worst cases. Never knew what to do with them. Taking on a judge seemed like suicide. It still might be, Catherine replies grimly. But some things are worth dying for. Cooper's documents provide crucial evidence of systematic fraud, property lines redrawn, ownership records altered, tax assessments manipulated, all designed to force out smallholders along the planned railroad route. As their collection of evidence grows, so does the price on Catherine's head. Judge Harrison, infuriated by her escape and increasingly concerned about her activities, doubles the reward for her capture. Wanted posters featuring her prison photograph appear in every town and way station. 2 weeks into their investigation, disaster strikes. While gathering testimony from a former land assessor in the town of Dry Creek, Catherine and Sam are recognized by the local sheriff, one of Harrison's loyal men. We've got company, Sam mutters, nodding toward the entrance of the boarding house where 3 armed deputies have appeared. Catherine and Sam slip out the back window, bullets splintering the frame as they run for their horses. In the ensuing chase through the town and into the surrounding hills, Sam takes a bullet to the shoulder. By nightfall, they've lost their pursuers but face a new crisis. Sam's wound needs proper treatment and their evidence carefully gathered over weeks of dangerous work is now at risk. They take shelter in an abandoned mine shaft where Catherine tends to Sam's injury by firelight. This changes things, Sam says through gritted teeth as Catherine extracts the bullet. They'll have descriptions of both of us now. Every lawman in the territory will be looking for a wounded man and his young companion. We can't stop now, Catherine replies, bandaging his shoulder. We're close, Sam. I can feel it. Despite his injury, they push on, now moving only at night and avoiding settlements entirely. Their destination is the home of Judge William Garrity, a retired federal judge, and the only man Catherine believes might help them navigate the legal labyrinth needed to bring Harrison to justice. Judge Garrity's ranch sits in a remote valley near the territorial border. As they approach, Catherine senses something wrong. The house is dark, No smoke rises from the chimney, despite the cool evening. "Stay alert," Sam whispers, drawing his pistol despite his injured arm. They find Judge Garrity in his study, slumped. Over his desk dead from what appears to be a heart attack. But the scattered papers and signs of a search tell another story. "They got here first," Catherine says bitterly, examining the scene. "They're eliminating anyone who might help us." A thorough search reveals that most of Garrity's legal documents are missing, but in a hidden compartment beneath the floorboards, similar to James's hiding place, they discover his personal journal and correspondence with federal authorities in Washington. "Look at this," Sam says, holding up a letter. Garrity was building a case against judicial corruption in the territory. He names Harrison specifically. Among the papers is the name of another ally, Robert Ellison, U.S. Marshal for the new Mexico Territory, described as trustworthy and beyond Harrison's influence. "Santa Fe," Catherine says with renewed determination. "We need to get to Santa Fe." But the path to New Mexico is long and dangerous, especially with every lawman and bounty hunter in the Arizona Territory looking for them. And unknown to Catherine and Sam, Judge Harrison has hired a notorious tracker and killer named Elias Wade to hunt them down as they ride east toward the territorial border. Catherine feels the weight of the evidence they carry, documents, testimonies, and James's journal, all pointing to a conspiracy of greed and murder. She also feels the growing bond between herself and Sam, a man who has risked everything to help her seek justice. "Why did you believe me?" she asks one night as they camp in a sheltered arroyo. "Back in Liberty Creek, you could have turned me in for the reward." Sam is silent for a long moment, stoking the small hidden fire. "I was there when Harrison sentenced you. I saw your eyes, not the eyes of a killer, but of someone being buried alive. I'd been suspicious of Harrison for months, seeing how land conveniently changed hands wherever the railroad wanted to go. Your case was the one that finally made me speak up and cost you your badge," Catherine observes. "Some badges aren't worth wearing," he replies simply. The moment is interrupted by the distant sound of hoofbeats. They quickly douse the fire and move to defensive positions, but it's too late. Riders approach from multiple directions, surrounding them in the darkness. "Catherine Winters," calls a voice. "I'm Elias Wade. Judge Harrison sent me to bring you back dead or alive. His preference was dead, which suits me fine." Catherine and Sam exchange grim looks. They are outnumbered and trapped. But Catherine Winters has not come this far to surrender. Not when justice for James and for herself is finally within reach. Chapter 3. The Long Road to Justice. The pre-dawn. Darkness shrouds the arroyo as Elias Wade and his men tighten their perimeter around Catherine and Sam's position. Catherine's mind races, calculating angles of fire and escape routes as she checks the ammunition in her revolver, 5 bullets remaining. "We're pinned down," Sam whispers, his injured shoulder limiting his shooting ability. 6 men, maybe. 7. Catherine nods grimly. "Wade wants us to panic, to make a run for it, so they can gun us down in the open." "What's the play then?" Catherine's eyes gleam with sudden inspiration. "We give them what they expect with a twist, working quickly." In the darkness, Catherine creates a diversion using their bedrolls and Sam's hat mounted on a branch. Meanwhile, Sam gathers their precious evidence into a single saddlebag. "When I start shooting, move along the arroyo toward the horses," Catherine instructs. "I'll be right behind you." Catherine fires 3 rapid shots toward Wade's position, then triggers their rigged distraction, the bedrolls tumbling down the slope as if someone were making a desperate run for it. Wade's men open fire on the decoy, and in the chaos, Catherine and Sam slip away along the shadowed arroyo bed. They reach the horses just as the first light of dawn breaks over the eastern horizon. Mounting quickly, they ride hard for the territorial border the sound of pursuit fading behind them. By midday, they've crossed into New Mexico territory, but their situation remains desperate. Sam's wound has reopened during their escape, and Catherine knows Wade won't stop at the border, not with the sizable bounty Harrison has placed on her head. "We need to find somewhere safe to rest and regroup," Catherine says, eyeing Sam's blood-soaked sleeve with concern. "There's a mission settlement about 10 miles east," Sam suggests, his voice weak from blood loss. "San Miguel de Socorro. The priest there, Father Ignacio, helped me once before." The mission appears like a mirage, on the horizon whitewashed adobe walls gleaming in the afternoon sun. As they approach, Catherine resumes her disguise as Cal Winter, knowing that even here, word of the female fugitive from Arizona might have spread. Father Ignacio, an elderly Spaniard with kind eyes and a shrewd gaze, recognizes Sam immediately, but asks no questions as he helps them to a small room at the back of the mission. "Rest here," he says simply. "You will be safe for tonight." While the priest tends to Sam's wound, Catherine carefully organizes their evidence Cooper's copied. Records, Tom Sherman's affidavit, Judge Garrity's correspondence, and James's journal with its map of the gold discovery. Together, they tell the story of corruption, murder, and theft that has destroyed so many lives. "We still need more," Sam says weakly from his palate. "Something to directly connect Harrison to James's death." Catherine nods, her face grim with determination. "And I know where to find it. The Carroll brothers." The Carroll brothers, Joe and Frank, were notorious hired guns who had worked for Harrison on several occasions. Local gossip had placed them near Riverbend Ranch the day James died, but Catherine had never been able to prove it. "Last I heard, they were working up near Santa Fe," Sam says. "But Catherine, they're dangerous men." "So am I," she replies, her voice hard with resolve. "Rest and recover. I'll return in 3 days." Despite Sam's protests, Catherine departs the next morning, her disguise as Cal Winter firmly in place. Father Ignacio provides her with a letter of introduction to the sisters at Santa Fe's convent of St. Clair, ensuring she'll have a safe base from which to operate in the territorial capital. The journey to Santa Fe takes Catherine through spectacular landscapes of red rock canyons and pine-covered mountains. As Cal Winter, she attracts little attention, just another young drifter. Looking for work in the bustling territorial capital. Santa Fe proves both promising and dangerous. The city is beyond Harrison's direct influence, but bounty hunters drawn by the substantial reward have spread out across both territories. Catherine spots her own wanted poster in the town square, the reward now up to $1,000, a fortune in 1876. Through careful inquiries at local saloons and livery stables, Catherine learns that Frank Carroll is indeed in Santa Fe, frequenting a gambling house called the Silver Dollar. His brother Joe was reportedly killed in a gunfight several months earlier. For 2 nights, Catherine observes the Silver Dollar, watching patrons come and go while formulating a plan. Frank Carroll proves to be a creature of habit, arriving at sundown, drinking heavily, and leaving well after midnight, usually with most of his money lost at the poker tables. On the 3rd night, Catherine makes her move. Waiting in the shadowed alley behind the gambling house, she watches as a drunken Frank Carroll staggers out the back door. With practiced efficiency, she presses her revolver against his ribs. "Not a sound, Carroll," she hisses, guiding him deeper into the alley. "I just want to talk about Riverbend Ranch and James Winters." Recognition and fear flash across Carroll's face. "I don't know nothing about that." $500 says. "You do," Catherine counters, knowing from her observations that Carroll's gambling debts far exceed that amount. "Tell me what happened, sign a statement, and the money's yours." It takes an hour and several drinks in a private room at a different saloon, but Frank Carroll eventually breaks. His signed confession confirms Catherine's worst suspicions. Judge Harrison had hired the Carroll brothers to scare James Winters away from the property. When James refused to be intimidated, the confrontation turned violent, ending with his death. Wasn't supposed to kill him, Carroll slurs. But when we mentioned the gold he'd found, he got real protective. Harrison paid us extra to make it look like an accident. With Carroll's signed confession secured in her saddlebag, Catherine returns to Socorro, her heart both heavy with confirmed grief and lightened by the prospect of justice. She finds Sam. Much improved, his color returned and his arm in a sling. Together with Father Ignacio, they review their evidence and formulate a plan to reach U.S. Marshal Robert Ellison in Santa Fe. The mission is receiving visitors tomorrow, Father Ignacio informs them gravely. Men asking questions about strangers. You must leave tonight. Under cover of darkness, Catherine and Sam depart the mission, their course set for Santa Fe. But their path is far from clear. Wade and his bounty hunters had picked up their trail again. And Judge Harrison, now desperate as his corruption, is about to be exposed, has dispatched telegrams throughout the territory ordering Catherine's immediate capture. The final leg of their journey becomes a gauntlet of near misses and dangerous encounters. At a river crossing, they narrowly escape an ambush set by Wade's men. In a small mining town, they're forced to hide in an abandoned shaft when bounty hunters arrive with fresh wanted posters. Through it all, the bond between Catherine and Sam deepens, a partnership forged in shared danger and mutual respect that gradually evolves into something more. Neither speaks of it directly, both understanding that their future remains uncertain at best. As they approach Santa Fe, exhausted but determined, Wade and his remaining men make one final desperate attempt to stop them. In a rocky pass just outside the city, gunfire erupts from the boulders above. Sam takes a bullet in his good arm, and Catherine finds herself pinned down behind inadequate cover as Wade approaches, revolver drawn. Nothing personal, Mrs. Winters, Wade calls, just business. Catherine sees only one option, a desperate gamble. She throws her last remaining bullets into the dry brush near Wade's position and fires her final shot into them. The sparks ignite the tinder-dry vegetation, creating a sudden wall of flame that forces Wade and his men to retreat. In the chaos, Catherine helps the wounded Sam onto his horse, and they make their final push toward Santa Fe. U.S. Marshal Robert Ellison's office is located in a sturdy stone building near the territorial governor's mansion. As Catherine and Sam stagger through the door, their clothes smoke-stained and bloodied, the marshal rises from his desk in alarm. We have evidence of judicial corruption and murder against Judge Maxwell Harrison of the Arizona Territory, Catherine announces, dropping their precious saddlebag on his desk. My name is Catherine Winters, and I've come to claim justice. Chapter 4. Redemption Creek. The territorial courtroom in Santa Fe falls silent as Catherine Winters takes the witness stand. 3 months have passed since she and Sam delivered their evidence to Marshal Ellison. 3 months of investigation, depositions, and preparation for what the newspapers are calling the trial of the century in the territories. Catherine no longer needs her disguise as Cal Winter. Dressed in a simple but dignified dark blue dress borrowed from the wife of Marshal Ellison, she faces the crowded courtroom with quiet confidence. In the defendant's dock sits Judge Maxwell Harrison, his once imposing presence diminished by confinement and the weight of the evidence against him. Beside him, Edwin Blackwood looks equally diminished, his wealth unable to shield him from justice. U.S. Circuit Court Judge Ambrose Richardson, brought in specially from Denver to ensure an impartial trial, nods for Catherine to begin her testimony. For the next 2 hours, Catherine recounts the entire story, from James's discovery of gold on their property to his suspicious death, her false conviction, imprisonment, escape, and the dangerous journey to gather evidence. Her clear voice never wavers, even when describing the most painful moments. The prosecution presents their meticulously organized evidence. Cooper's copied records showing altered land titles, Tom Sherman's affidavit about fraudulent tax assessments, Judge Garrity's correspondence detailing his suspicions about Harrison, James's journal with its map of the gold deposit, and most damning of all, Frank Carroll's signed confession about James's murder on Harrison's orders. Carroll himself testifies, reluctantly, having been granted immunity in exchange for his testimony. His confirmation of Harrison's role in James's death sends shockwaves through the courtroom. During cross-examination, Harrison's expensive Denver lawyer attempts to discredit Catherine by focusing on her prison escape and fugitive status, but Judge Richardson intervenes. The witness's actions following her escape were directed solely toward proving her innocence of the charges against her. The judge states firmly, the court views these as the desperate measures of someone wrongfully imprisoned, not as evidence against her character. Sam Hawkins testifies next, his arm still in a sling from the final confrontation with Wade. His account of Harrison's systematic corruption during his time as deputy marshal adds another layer to the prosecution's case. The trial lasts 2 weeks, with witnesses from throughout the Arizona Territory coming forward now that Harrison's intimidating power has been broken. By the final day, even Harrison's lawyer seems defeated, going through the motions of a defense that convinces no one. When the jury returns after just 3 hours of deliberation, their verdict is unanimous, guilty on all counts for both Harrison and Blackwood. Judge Richardson's sentence is equally decisive, 20 years hard labor for Harrison, 15 for Blackwood, and full restitution to all victims of their land schemes. Most importantly for Catherine, her conviction is overturned, and her full legal rights to Riverbend Ranch are restored. The court would like to extend its deepest apologies to Mrs. Winters for the grave miscarriage of justice she has suffered. Judge Richardson adds, her courage in pursuing justice at great personal risk represents the finest qualities of the American spirit. As Catherine leaves the courtroom, a free woman at last, Sam waits for her at the bottom of the steps. In the months since their arrival in Santa Fe, their relationship has deepened, but they have carefully avoided discussing the future until the trial's conclusion. Congratulations, Mrs. Winters, Sam says with a warm smile. Or should I say, ranch owner Winters? Catherine returns his smile. It's still hard to believe it's over, that I can go home. About that, Sam says, suddenly serious. I've been offered a position as Deputy U.S. Marshal here in the New Mexico Territory. Marshal Ellison was impressed with how we handled the evidence gathering. Catherine feels a momentary pang of disappointment, quickly masked. That's wonderful, Sam. You deserve it. The thing is, he continues, I'm not sure I want to pin on another badge. I've been thinking about ranching instead. He hesitates. Riverbend Ranch is going to need a lot of work to restore it after all this time. Hope rises in Catherine's heart. Are you offering to help me rebuild, Mr. Hawkins? I'm offering more than that, if you'll have me, he replies, taking her hand. In his, we faced death together, Catherine. I'd like to try facing life with you, too. 1 year later, Riverbend Ranch is transformed. The abandoned buildings have been repaired and expanded. Cattle once again graze the lush pastures, and the gold mine on the northern property now, legally registered in Catherine's name, provides the capital needed for continued improvements. In the ranch house, Catherine Winters Hawkins stands on the porch, watching Sam work with the new hands breaking horses in the corral. Her hand unconsciously moves to her slightly rounded belly, where their first child grows. The territorial governor's proclamation arrived yesterday, officially renaming the nearby settlement Redemption Creek at the request of its citizens, many of them families who have returned to reclaim land stolen by Harrison and Blackwood. Catherine smiles as she surveys her reclaimed kingdom. The iron shackles that once bound her have been transformed into an iron will that brought justice not just for herself, but for everyone victimized by corruption and greed. As Sam looks up from his work and waves to her, Catherine waves back, her heart full. From prisoner to fugitive to pioneer of justice, her journey has come full circle. The frontier remains harsh and challenging, but with truth restored and love found, Catherine, Winters Hawkins faces the future unafraid.